such as the ones you've just talked about, close down all the clean coal-fired power stations in the West, open lots of filthy ones in China. How does that improve the planet? What I've done is to work out how much it's going to cost to make just 1 Celsius of global warming go away if you follow the measures to reduce CO2 emissions that they are recommending. And the answer is it's 10 times more expensive than it would be to sit back, enjoy the sunshine, and put up with such relatively small damage as might occur if the global warming happened at the rate which they forecast, which it won't. And this is the kind of conversation, to use a word that Al Gore frequently comes up with, this is the kind of conversation that Al Gore won't have. Al, baby, you're still running from me. You can run, but you can't hide. I'm coming to get you. It's no good standing there like a sort of high priest. And a conversation is a two-sided process, Al, baby. And if you won't debate with me or anyone who understands the science or economics behind this garbage of yours, then nobody but nobody is going to believe you anymore. Your day is done.
Well, Lord Monckton, you're too kind to Al Gore. You say he thought that the ice caps would really melt. He thought sea levels were going to rise. He thought it'd be 10 degrees hotter and we'd all be dead. This guy's always changing his story. As you know, 30 years ago, they were saying it was global freezing at the Club of Rome. They cold-bloodedly, if you read the Richard N. Haas CFR reports and others, say decades ago that they were going to use this to organize society for a global government. They're now using the banking crisis that they engineered to try to now transfer the euro into an even more dictatorial system, complete with euro football teams, which I know you've talked about world government. I mean, I really think my only criticism of you is that you're too gentlemanly and you're being too kind. This is not someone who's wrong. I will call him for what he is, a criminal con artist who wants to commit genocide. He knows full well, with the State Department memorandums like 200, that if they put those carbon taxes in on the third world, it's a death sentence in the next decade, as you've documented, for 1 billion people. This is a Hitler in waiting, and I will call him for what he is. Bottom line, in your view, is Al Gore conscious of this?
I think Al Gore knows quite well that he's got this wrong. I don't think he ever really intended to get it right. I think you are correct. Right from the start, his agenda was to force a particular result on the community, whether it was true or not. In June 1988, he waited until a particularly hot day. In that particularly hot month, he then had the air conditioning turned off in Congress that day when his friend and financial benefactor, James Hansen, testified that the rate of warming was going to be, as it turns out, 4 times greater than it actually has been. And so it was all designed to terrify Congress, to fool them into going along with this rubbish. And of course, for a time, he was successful. But the virtue, I think, Alex, of the still small voice of calm that I try to represent here, just going at them time and time again on the science, pointing out that the science doesn't say what they say it says. It doesn't say we've definitely got a problem. It increasingly says we definitely haven't got a problem. That even if the science were not to say that, the economists who have examined this are nearly unanimous in the peer-reviewed literature, saying that it's cheaper to do nothing than to lift a finger now. That is the clear advice of Bjorn Lomborg, Richard Toll, William Nordhaus, David Henderson. I could go on naming them all day. If you do science by consensus, which you and I don't, well, let's just tell the other side, because they do. The consensus in the economic peer-reviewed literature is that even if the problem is as big as they say it is scientifically, it's cheaper to do nothing about it at all. There are many real problems around the world. There's still far too much starvation, poverty, and disease, which we could be getting rid of instead.
Yes, sir.
These billions on all this rubbish.
Lord Monckton, in closing, it's important to give out some of your websites that have just incredible research. They're available for everyone. But in closing, sir, specifically looking into the future by going back to the past, just 2 years ago, there was still a fake consensus in the big corporate dominant media that no real scientist disagreed with what Al Gore said, and he was the high priest, almost like the voice of God speaking to Moses. 2 short years later, they are a laughingstock, and I've seen Al Gore in speeches and interviews where even his fellow travelers in this power grab say, my friends laugh at me, even liberals do. And I'm a talk radio host. I do a lot of interviews. I talk to people on the street. I would say their cult has shrunk by about 90%, and they're in deep trouble. So where do we, I mean, A, do you agree with that? And B, where do we go from here? How are they going to try to regroup, and how do we finally put this monstrosity into the dust heap, the grave of frauds?
Right. I think nothing is really going to stop until somebody gets prosecuted. The fact is there's enough bogus science out there, people producing deliberately false results in the IPCC's documents, for interest, a very good example. It's now very clear that if we're going to stop them, we've got to put 1 or 2 of these bogus scientists behind bars. Now, let me be clear about this. If you're producing honest science that says you think we've got a problem, that's fine by me. You do the science and we can talk about it. But if you're producing bogus science and you're bending the data and using dodgy statistical techniques and you know who you are, then we are now coming after you. I've recently been quietly writing round to professors of statistics, giving them a set of data, not saying what it is, and asking them to do a very simple piece of analysis on it for me. So far, they've all refused because they have guessed that what I've stumbled upon is an enormous fraud right at the heart of the IPCC's documents, and they, because they don't dare to sustain the sort of pressure that you and I get put under, they are not willing simply to do a straightforward statistical calculation for fear that they will have to point out what nonsense this all is. So the corruption of science will only be brought to an end when 1 or 2 scientists realize that they are not above the same laws that we have to follow. And that if they are perpetrating scientific frauds, it's no good putting on a white coat and saying we are immune because we are scientists and academic freedom includes the freedom to lie and commit fraud. No, it doesn't.
And this is not
damaging scientists who have been going around deliberately falsifying, exaggerating the supposed certainty of this, making bogus results, tweaking graphs in various ways, abolishing the medieval warm period, and the guy who did that is already having his collar felt by the prosecuting authorities. We are closing on these people. 1 or 2 of them, that'll be enough. Send them to jail for a good long time, and the rest will run for cover and learn that in future, if you want to do science, you must do honest science or go to jail for it.
Well, I absolutely agree with you, because this is not turnabout as fair play. They're saying arrest you, arrest myself, and many others. We have our free speech, and we're doing our research. We're not getting taxpayer funds, then deliberately putting out fraud, and then calling to tax people and take over society. I mean, this is clear fraud, and if they're able to carry out their policies, would result, and we're talking about 1 billion souls or more. Just very briefly, because we've got to go, and I know you're also busy as well. What are the numbers you have? Because the numbers I have, I've seen are 1 billion dead over a decade if they put the Copenhagen Treaty into place. What are your numbers on that, very briefly, and then give us your website.
All right. If what's going to happen is if they don't start spending on the poor the money they're now spending on global warming, then, as you rightly say, about 1 billion are going to die whose lives could have been saved. And that's before you start in on the huge damage they'll do to the economies of the West. And if the economies of the West go under, then the economy of the rest of the world goes under with it. So we've got to stop this nonsense now. It's cost far too much already. A few people have got very rich. A lot of people have become a great deal poorer because of this. Enough is enough. The science is in, the truth is out, the game is up, and the scare is over.
Well, we're glad that you're out there exposing these people, because we know that Maurice Strong and others said, as well as Mr. Hansen and countless others, that they want a post-industrial world. And since Al Gore sold us NAFTA and GATT and the environmental rules so far, they've done a great job. England is being deindustrialized. The United States is completely falling apart. and hopefully we can reverse this before these saboteurs complete their